Hello, everyone. I could not be more excited for this episode today. Today I'm interviewing the beautiful and amazing Hilary Phelps. Hilary is a woman with many titles: a mom, a sister, an addiction recovery advocate, an entrepreneur, and on top of it all, a Pilates and yoga queen. Hilary has an amazing recovery story to share, and she recently shared that she is 15 years sober. I am honored to have Hilary here today telling her story. Thank you, Hilary, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I still get teary-eyed when I hear addiction recovery advocate because it's such a new title, but it's something that's really important to me.
So I'm super excited to talk about it today. Just to start off, just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are.
Who am I? Such a deep question. I am first and foremost a mom to a almost 6-year-old. His name's Alexander. He is wonderful. From the time I was little, I always wanted to be a mom. I never knew what I wanted to do professionally or anything, but I knew I always wanted to be a mom. And he's such a joy and such a sweet boy. And just
6 years old. That's so cute.
He's 6 years old, and he is so smart and keeps me on my toes, and he's energetic, and he's so much fun. And like you said, addiction recovery advocate. I'll celebrate 16 years in 16? June. Yeah, June after a while. And that's probably, I say Alexander's the most important, but recovery is the most important, because without recovery, I wouldn't be the mom that I could be to him. Right. And so recovery is really important to me. And, I started speaking out to give women a voice in this space because we're often, we don't seek the same treatment as men. And so I wanted women to feel less alone. And that's amazing. What else? I do Pilates and yoga and breath work and all those healing modalities that make me a better person.
That's great. That's a great start. Before we dive into what you're doing now with recovery, who you are, I want to talk about your childhood, your upbringing. So you were in Maryland. You were born in Maryland, right? Raised.
I was born in Whiteford, Maryland, which is north of here.
Yeah, it's kind of close to where I am from. I live in Fallston.
Yes.
So a lot of my friends, one of my great family friends, is from Street, Maryland. So kind of right near you.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yes. Yeah. So we grew up in Whiteford. My parents bought 5 acres of land in the middle of the woods. They built their dream home. My siblings and I would play with a creek that went through our property. My sister and I would catch crayfish and play with algae. I mean, we had a really tactile, nature-filled childhood. And we joined the local swimming club, North Hartford Swim Club in Jarrettsville.
So I swam for, sorry to cut you off, but I swam, I don't know if you know, my mom was ask her, but I was I don't think she'll know. Fountain Green.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kenzie and I swam for Fountain Green since we were 6 until COVID hit.
Yeah.
But we swam. I remember North Hartford all the time.
Yeah. It was North Hartford, Fallston, Fountain Green.
Yeah.
There's the
Bel Air Arena Club.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Arena Club wasn't around when I was swimming.
Okay.
That's how old I am. I mean, it's just it's not. But so that was our group that we'd compete against. Yeah. And so grew up. That's where I learned to swim, was North Hartford. I started swimming. I'm the oldest of 3. I have a sister, Whitney, that's 2 years younger, and a brother, Michael, that's 7.5 years younger. And so I started swimming the year my brother was born. I was 7. We started swimming year-round. My parents always wanted us to be in the water for water safety. And so I didn't start. I started swimming summer league, and then I wanted the big trophy. That's kind of the joke. I was I don't want a 3rd place trophy. I want the big one. Yeah. And my mom's well, the kids with the big trophies are year-round swimmers, so you got it. And I was sign me up. And that was it. And then I started swimming. My sister started swimming, and then my brother followed us shortly after.
And so, no, that's actually really funny, because when I was listening to your interviews prior to this, I was I can almost relate with her a little bit, because Mackenzie and I were always doing sports constantly when we were younger. And swimming was just something, summer swim was something that we always loved. The whole summer, those were our friends, that team, that group. Yeah. And we did winter swim. It was so weird because we had different experiences with coaches, but we did winter swim 1 year, and then next year we wouldn't, and we did it for 2 years because we wanted to do basketball. So it was this whole ordeal. And I always remember thinking, I was here are the winter swimmers coming over. We'd swim against some of the best. And Kenzie and I actually could keep up with some of the best just because we were great athletes growing up, and we were always doing something. So either we weren't in the water in the winter, we were always doing CrossFit or basketball or something that kept us in exercise. But I like hearing, I can relate to you so much now that we talk about the different teams, even though I was not as good as the swimmers you were, but still, we both swam. So when did you realize that you had a love for swimming? Because I find it really cool that you were, one of the best.
Yeah, so we started swimming at a club called RASAC, which was like Renaissance Athletic Sports. It was a very small team. And I was 8 or 9 when I started. I hadn't thought about it in a while. And he would just throw me in with the boys to do distance. Like, I think I was the youngest on the team, so he would just have me do distance. And so I did it. And then at age 9, the coach put me in the 1500. It was a long course pool. I think it was like in Falston. It's one of the big it's an outdoor pool.
Is. What's 1500? How many laps is that?
1500 is 30. I was like, it's been a while. So it's a mile.
Oh my goodness.
So he puts me in this race. It's pouring down rain. It's cold. And I was 9, and the girls, it was open. So they were like 17 and 18. And I'm crying the whole time. And like, I get out, and the girls all waited for me, and and it was so supportive and great. Like, and that was when North Baltimore Aquatic Club approached my mom and was like, hey, we've got room for Hilary. It's a very small club at the time. Yeah. It had always produced Olympic athletes. Yes. Every year we had somebody in the Olympics, and Tom Himes came to my mom and was like, we'd really love for her to be on our team and I was, and it worked. And my mom said, what about Whitney? And they were like, we've got a spot for Whitney too. And so we went to North Baltimore, and at that point, my parents, my dad was driving me from Whiteford to Towson every day for doubles practice. So I would swim from 5 to 7 before school. Then my parents got me a boundary exception to go to Southampton, where my mom was a teacher.
Southampton, yep.
Yeah, so I went to Southampton Middle for 6th grade. And then my mom would take me back down to Baltimore at night for practice. So they worked it out. I don't know how they worked it out. My sister and my brother were still at North Hartford Elementary, and and at that point they were like, this is too much. They realized that I had talent and that I was really good, and so they sold their dream house and we moved to Towson.
Which is so funny. I love that you're so near, because I call it MBAC because it's where all the great swimmers were. But what was it? It's North
Baltimore
NBAC,
Club. North Baltimore Aquatic.
And a lot of my actually great friends swim there now. And then girls that swam for Notre Dame, like there's just, I don't know, you wouldn't know their names, but they swam there now. One girl that we swim against, her name was Amber, but she swam at my high school, but then also still swam for NBAC, and then now swims for like UPenn, I think is where she's at swimming.
Tom Himes is now the head coach at NBAC, and Paul Yetter, who I swam with,
and
trained with, is also a coach. I'm like, oh my gosh,
it's so funny. And in Southampton, I lived right next to there. There was like I don't know if it was Amy Clay. It was a neighborhood right there next to Southampton, that like 7-Eleven. Like I lived right there. It's so funny. I can envision everything.
It's such a small world. I love that.
But so you were named the fastest swimmer in the country at what, age 12?
When I was 11 and 12. So I made nationals at 12.
Yeah.
And Janet Evans was the distance swimmer at the time. She was at Stanford. She was an Olympic distance swimmer.
Yeah.
And my times, like we were tracking times. There was another woman, Leanne Gathing, another girl, I guess. And we were kind of the top 2 in the country at that time in our event. And so, I was the fastest.
What's that like at 12 or at 11? You're called one of the best or the best, like mentally. I mean, it's got to be amazing, but like, what was that like,
Yeah, so I think at the time I just had like blinders on because I was so dedicated just to like doing the process of swimming. Like I loved doing it. I loved being in the water. I loved swimming. I loved being with, the other people on the team. Like I loved my teammates. And so I just didn't focus on, I just kind of focused on what I was doing versus the outcome and the product that it was creating.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, and I've shared this before, that someone's like, well, if you trained harder, you'd be faster. And I was like, but I'm the best.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's not good enough.
Yeah.
And so like in my little tiny 12-year-old brain, something clicked that was like, well, you're just not good the way you are. And I think if they had said that to somebody else, it may have been motivating, and so it's just like, just never know the impact that what you say. And that had a huge impact on.
Yeah. I was going to ask, did you ever struggle with being the best? Because in sports, like I said, I was never like really good at one sport. It was just like this, like I grew up always just having a sport every season or 2 sports every season. Yeah. And, I never understood or never thought about the kids that are called the best in the country, or I swam with some of the best in the state, and what that mindset is like, because usually I like to, have someone that I'm trying to catch up to, or it's, like in swimming, there was always someone in the lane next to me that I was trying to catch up to. I knew I wasn't going to be the fastest. So I always wondered, like, what's that struggle like, with no one on top of you, like you are the best. I don't know.
So I think that just leads to like competing with yourself,
exactly.
right? Because like in swimming, you're competing against the clock is what we're told.
Right.
It's like, it's never about beating somebody else. It's about beating your best. And so what a beautiful analogy for life too, as we go forward, it's like not about besting someone else, but just being better than we were the day before. And so I think that was something that we were always taught, and we were always told, like, winning, everybody wants to win, but really it's just, if you don't do your best, then that's all that matters. And so that was,
which is great. I think that's something that like a lot of us are taught now, as it's being talked about more, like mental health. And like our dad and mom have always taught us, like we were always taught that like just be 1% better than you were the day before, or just try to be 1% better than you were the day before. And as I start to run more, I struggle with like sometimes knowing time. Even this morning I was struggling with like pace, and dad was like, the other day, so I'm not the fastest runner, so I ran like 4 miles or something before I ran like 12 miles, and it was at a 10:50 pace, and I was like, because I was walking, like mental struggle during running. And I was like, oh my goodness, Dad, like I don't know what's up with me. I just ran like 10:58, like usually right around here I was running like 10-minute miles. And he was like, Madison, a year ago 10:58 would have been your fastest run, and now you're saying that it's your worst. Like that's an amazing thing to be proud of. And it's something that it takes a second for us to realize, because there's always like that voice in our head that's like, you could do better, or you're not as better as you, like I don't know, there's always this voice. And so I think it's something that we're all still learning, and something that I'll learn as I get older.
It's like the ego versus the soul.
Exactly.
Right? The ego is telling you you're not good enough, and the soul's telling you like you're great the way you are. And it's like finding that middle ground of like, because you don't want to like live in the ego of being like, I'm the best, or like this, like, and so I think finding that, just
that
being
little
like
balance.
happy in the moment is really powerful.
So I was listening. So I want to talk about like college, and then where you transitioned, and where the mark where you started to maybe go downhill and
step into my addiction a little bit more. So I started, after, my sister was third in the world at 14. So my sister started to eclipse me in swimming. She was really good. And so when that started to happen, that felt really hard, because she's my younger sister. And so instead of like persevering and pushing on, this isn't why, so it's nothing, but like good. I started to kind of experiment with drugs and alcohol, and I was also, I think looking back now, I had depression. Like I remember talking, saying like, I think I need to see a therapist. I think I'm just struggling with these things. And I remember like I had a boyfriend. I broke up with like my first boyfriend, and it's like 14, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world, and like all all the things that feel really heavy at 14. And I just, and I started coping with drinking and with drugs, and I started experimenting, Lacrosse, like Baltimore is a lacrosse town. So it's like hanging out with like lacrosse players. Kids. And like, beer was a big part of that culture when I was in college, and I never felt good enough. Like, even though I was the best in the country, I got straight A's until 7th grade. Like I remember my first beat, like I still never felt good enough, like funny enough, smart enough, pretty enough. Like I was never good enough on the inside. And so drinking and putting that like substances in my body made me not feel that way, and as a 14-year-old, I don't know that I could put words to like, I think I'm depressed. I couldn't come out and say like I'm self-medicating with this. Like I just didn't know.
And things were so different, I imagine, at that time, because I've grown up, and even like when I was younger to now, you can see how it's changed the conversation around mental health. Yes. So I can't imagine what it was like, a couple years before,
And I've shared this, and this is no slight on them, because it's how they grew up. But like my parents grew up in homes, right? Like the generation, you don't talk about men, like especially outside the home. Like you keep those things inside, and like if you just kind of ignore them, they go away. And that's how my parents were raised, and that's how that's how kind of we were raised. It's like, you know, put on your sunglasses, don't let anybody see you cry. Like, you're fine. And I was like, okay, I'm fine. Like, and so like toughen up, like that whole, and you're right. Like the narratives really changed around the way, like we talk to children and like allowing them to share emotion. Like that's really evolved. But at the time it was like, okay, I just need to like stuff it down. I just need to like be tougher. And that wasn't the right thing for me.
Yeah. So really quick, I'm going to go back and ask the question because you mentioned your siblings, and then I'm going to go back. But so you're a great swimmer. You know, I didn't even know you had a sister until like the other day, so I'm glad I know that I did my research. But she sounds amazing. And we grew up obviously knowing your brother in swimming. Yeah. It's a pretty good swimmer. But I just laugh about it.
Because I was like a diehard Jedi. I was like, I'll do anything to swim. I love swimming. And I was like, and I laugh about this, and I was like, I was okay. I mean, I got a full scholarship to swim in college.
Amazing.
Like, right. But then I joke, I'm like, in my family, I was not, you know, in any other family.
I love how everyone was a swimmer. And all like, 3 kids.
Well, and then my sister was 3rd in the world at 14. She was an Olympic hopeful in 96. She got 5th at trials, but her best time would have won the Olympics in 96 in Atlanta. She had a herniated disc and a stress fracture, 2 bulging discs, and had an eating disorder. And so my sister, who was kind of like, I don't know, they had to bribe her to swim, right? Yeah. But then she ended up being this phenomenal swimmer. My brother didn't like to get his face wet, wouldn't turn over. They had him swimming backstroke to start, and he's like the greatest swimmer of all time. So like the excitement level from like, I was like gung-ho, really thrilled, and Michael was like, oh, and it's like, but then the ability increased significantly as we got younger. I just think that's so funny.
It's so funny as we grew up as like, Kenzie and I would like look at swimmers, and I remember like actually knowing that Michael Phelps wouldn't get his face wet because there was a time where I wouldn't put my head in the water. Like I'd swim and just like crank my neck like this. I'd still like do the breathing, but I was so scared to put my face in the water. And this was like actually at the age of like 8 or like 9. It was pretty embarrassing. My mom was like, honey, just put your face in the water. You're going to hurt your neck. I was like, it was like taking so much time. And yet I was still really fast. I was winning, but I looked crazy. Like I did not want to get my face wet. And one of my coaches was like, it's okay. You know, Michael Phelps doesn't really put his face in the water when he was a kid either. And I was like, someone wrote a joke about it. And, but my question was, how is it growing up in that family of competitive swimmers? Like, it's got to be exciting, but was there ever a time where you like struggled with like your siblings being better at sometimes and your siblings like overcome, like what was that like?
And this has been so my sister, and I think it was harder for me when my sister started to beat me because she was younger, she's closer in age, she was really good, and instead of like persevering, I just kind of gave up. I was like, well, I don't want to push. Like, I don't want to. And so my mom also jokes. She's like, sometimes, Hilary, I literally feel like you would just do the nice thing. I'd be like, I won last time, so why don't you win this time? And she's like, what is it? Like, I just didn't have the same, like my sister and brother are just fierce competitors. And I just don't have it like they do. And they're just different. And so, so the hardest was my sister. And then my sister made the national team. At 14, and so she was traveling with the national team. She was in Paris, and like she was amazing.
14 years old.
I know, she was so good. And so she would travel, you know. And then Michael kind of came onto the scene at 14. At that time, you know, is when he went to nationals and won the rookie of the meet at seniors. And I was in college at that time, and I was drinking. I still remember this. Like, and my friend Matt told me we were all swimmers and we were hanging around, and Michael, like, you know, had won this award, and I was like, just wait, he's going to be the greatest of all time. And they're like, he just had a good meet. People burn out all the time. I'm like, no. And they came back a couple of years later. They're like, you were right. I was I know. I was just a proud sister, but I was like, he's going to be the best. And so with Michael, it was different. But then I think, you know, there was a little bit of struggle because Michael, when Whitney tried out in 96, Michael was in 2000, made this first Olympic team at 15 in Australia. And I think, you know, in that, so it was hard for Whitney and I, but then I think it was hard for Whitney for a while then because like, my sister gave up everything for swimming. I mean, she gave up dances and football games and friends. Like, she was so dedicated. And I think it just, in my opinion, not hers, like but I think it was just really hard for her for a while to
because even like growing up with Mackenzie and like us, so you and your sister around the same age, me and Kenzie, identical twins. Obviously, there are a lot of moments, and Kenzie was always better at swimming. And so there was always a moment where I was like, oh, I just want to be like her, or, you know, I'm never going to be that good. But there's obviously our whole lives we're supporting each other, celebrating each other, but I just always wonder how it is for other siblings that do the same sports, because Kenzie and I always did the same thing, you know, comparing yourself and like kind of fighting that battle of comparison, but like wanting to support, but like also like in your mind being like, oh, sometimes I wish like I'd get that medal, or I'd get that trophy, or I'd be up on the higher podium. You know what I mean?
And I think it's harder for siblings that are the same, like girls and girls and boys and boys. Like there wasn't that with my brother. But like, you know, my sister and I, like I said, we're totally different. My sister's super competitive. Yeah. She's got a drive unlike anyone I've ever met. She's just incredible. She's funny. Like I look at my sister, I'm like, she is so cool. Like I am not cool. Like I'm the nerdy one and she's like really cool. And so like I wanted to be like that when I was growing up, you know, and that's where alcohol took me. Like it allowed me to be that person or whoever else I wanted to be, where my sister was just always like in her person and just really authentic.
Yeah. So back to when you're starting to drink.
Yeah.
So obviously I know, but people that don't know, Baltimore is like a lacrosse centered place. When people ask why I went to Alabama, I was like, well, because if you don't play lacrosse and go to play up north or around Maryland for lacrosse, a lot of the girls go down south. And I just always refer back to like my school being like, now NDP is one of the biggest lacrosse schools. Just the all girls schools in Baltimore are really big for lacrosse recruiting. What was that social scene like? You talked about it a little bit, but just in depth more throughout college, and, you know, how did that start? I mean, you kind of already answered it, but start the drinking.
Well, so when I was in 10th grade, I'd started to get college. I think it's like, I forget like what the rule, I think in 10th grade they can send you letters, and I think in 11th grade they can reach out to you.
Yes, I think it's something like that.
Something like that. So in 10th grade I was getting letters, like interest letters to come and see their college next year. And I went to my mom and I was like, I'm done with swimming. I'm going to play lacrosse, because I wanted to be part of. Like I just never felt part of. And so my mom's like, you are? And I said, yeah. She goes, when's the last time you picked up a lacrosse stick? I was so cocky. I was like, never. But I mean, I'm a good swimmer, so it's going to translate. Mind you, I'm the worst on land coordination person ever. Like I can't kick a soccer ball like fluidly.
I love it, but in the water, it's perfect.
In the water, it's fine. But I am not a land sport person. And so, and lacrosse, there's no pocket in the girls' stick. Like it's hard. It's like, it's a skill. And my mom's like, okay, well, what does that look? Let's walk through this. What does that look like for you? I'm like, well, I'm going to quit and like, you know, I'll go to college and I'll play lacrosse. She goes, oh, okay.
Just now.
So yeah, just here. Okay. So these girls have been playing for years. Like you've been swimming. You think you're just going to go. All right. So here's the deal. You can keep swimming for 6 more years and get a full scholarship, because that's what they're offering you. And you can go anywhere you want.
Yeah.
Or you can go play lacrosse and you're responsible for every application, for every tuition. Like you're responsible for covering that, because my mom was a teacher, my dad was a police officer. Like they didn't have money to send us all to college, like to pay our bills. And so she's like, so those are your options. You can have it covered and keep swimming for just a small amount, or you can get paid. And I'm like,
you're like, okay, fine.
You know, she's
got
like,
me.
and you can stay here. She's like, because you'll go to, it was Towson State at the time. She's like, you know, and I was like, all right, fine. So I kept going, and so, but I wanted to be like everybody else. Like I wanted to be a part of, and so I'd hang out with them and I'd drink, and we would like do all the things, like pour vodka into watermelons and eat them at lacrosse games, thinking nobody could smell it. Like so stupid. And all the things. Yeah.
Such a weird, things have changed. But
like now I'm really thinking back. I'm like, and then there's this thing called Zima, and we used to put Jolly Ranchers in Zima. It's basically alcoholic Sprite. Yeah. And it was so stupid.
Except I think people probably still do that today.
And
so
we were like,
let's pray for them.
Yeah, exactly. So I started to transition into drinking then.
Yeah. So, and then how did you start to see your attitude, personality, relationships, how did it all start to alter? Like, where did you start to see, or like, I guess you can realize now, but like, maybe just talk about how your attitude, personality changed, and then how your relationships were affected.
That's a really great question. So I started to not care about my grades, not care about my family. Like, I only wanted to hang out with people that were drinking and using. Right. And, you know, at the time my parents were going through a divorce, and that allowed a little bit of space for me to explore a little bit more, because, you know, I mean, it was a hard time for everybody. Right. And so I learned to deal with it by drinking, by drinking and doing that. And like, you know, going out, I remember I'd have like coolers of beer in my car, and, but I became really indignant, and I became like, my grades started suffering. I just really didn't care. I started, let me share this. I started like smoking weed at school, like all the things that sound really, I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like such a degenerate, but I just didn't care. I didn't care about much other than like, and that's when the real shift started happening and only hanging out with people that were doing the same thing.
Yeah. And so how did it change, like, I don't know if this is too much asking, but how did it change your relationship either with like your siblings, your best friends, who started to notice? Did anyone say anything? Like, did anyone realize what was going on, and then how did this alter your relationships? Did it deepen your relationships because you like could confide in them, or it was just like
I kept it all inside, right? Like that's how I cope. And so I think my sister would see, and my mom was out of town and I'd party, and my sister pulled up. She's like, "Nope, I'm out of here," because she was like really good. She's like, "I'm not going down for this," and so it definitely put like a wedge in all of my familial relationships. Right. Yeah. And then for my friends, like, I just did whatever it took. Like there was just a group of people and we would just drink. And so it was surface level friendship. Like there was no deep connection. There was no like, I'm struggling or I'm this. It was like, where are we going on Friday? Exactly. Can we do this before school? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Cause you're all into the same thing and all have the same like needs and wants.
Then from there, I mean, like high school then just turned into college. And like in college for me, it was like a huge breeding ground for people that drink.
Right, because everything's like, and I'm sure you were sorry, I just cut you off, but in high school, like for me, like alcohol wasn't even introduced until like, to us until like our end of the year, like into senior year. So I can't imagine at what age did you have your first drink? 14. If you don't mind me asking. 14, yeah. So I was always the youngest in my grade, so I think I was like, going into my sophomore year of high school at 14, I think, or maybe, going into my sophomore year. And then college has been such an eye-opener because, like, I was in this bubble, and now I'm like, there's so many things that people do. Like, I didn't even know. I'm kind of like the innocent one in my friend group because I don't know a lot about a lot. And, but I can't imagine, at that age, and then going to college, already doing, what you were doing, and then there's this world of all of it.
Because it's just a free-for-all. You know, like in high school, I still had to go home. I still had a curfew. I still like had some boundaries and rules. Where in college, it was like the only thing I had to do was show up for practice because basically I had a scholarship. And so I had to go. And but I thought it was just one big party. And you can find anybody. And like swimmers, I don't know how they are. Yeah. Like, but swimmers are partiers. Like we love to party. We love to drink. We love to like have fun. And so there's always somebody that wanted to drink, have fun, or go out, and so it was really easy in college. And so for someone whose addiction was just starting to like light up and get turned on, it was a really exciting and scary place to be.
So then recently you became more transparent and open up about your story. I want to talk about that for some time, because what was that like? Let's actually go back and talk about like when did you realize? I know you talked about a relationship that maybe was not the cause of why you got sober, but one of the reasons why you were like, okay, I need to do this for me. And so talk about that a little bit, that story, and then go into like when you decided to walk into
treatment.
Yeah.
So so my college friends started, because I was a blackout drinker, which means that every time I drink alcohol, I would black out. So I didn't know, so I could not physically, emotionally, mentally have one drink. It was just not possible. And I'm happy to elaborate on that, but it wasn't possible. So every time I would start drinking, nobody knew where the night would go. Nobody knew which person would show up, because it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Sometimes I was like the funnest person, which is what I always wanted. So I was like, great. So I continued to chase that desire of being fun. I was like, great, I'm going to drink tonight. It's going to be fun. But I wouldn't be fun. I joked about this, and someone that knows me now was like, I can't see it. Like there'd be a girl that would stare at me in the bathroom, and I was like, what are you looking at? Yeah. And I like, you want to, which is not who I am. Yeah. But it was like, but that's where drinking took me. And I'd get angry, or I would get, really sad, and I would just cry. I mean, you just never knew. And so for me, my friends, I just started behaving in ways that weren't aligned with who I am. And my friends, my senior year, came up to me. There were 3 of them, my roommates, and they were like, we're really worried about you. Like, you're not you, like you're just, and I basically was like, whatever, screw you, I can get new friends, I don't need you. And it ended up working out, and like we look back now, it's like, oh my gosh, was that an intervention? Like it was kind of a little intervention. But after college, I just continued. And so, in college you can kind of get away with it, but after school, I was 23, 24, 25. I was still drinking. I switched to wine because I thought that made me sophisticated. Because if you drink, in my mind, if you drink wine, then you're not an alcoholic, because alcoholics only drink hard liquor, not fancy drinks. They're sneaking it. They're drinking before work. Like, the idea of what's portrayed as an alcoholic was not what I was. And so, so after college, I did that. And I also, I felt empty inside. And that hole that I used to fill with alcohol, or tried to fill with alcohol, like, alcohol stopped working. And so I found myself in toxic relationships, because I thought if I was with somebody, then that meant I was good enough and loved and seen and supported, even if that person was not healthy, if it was not a healthy relationship. And so I'd gone through a couple of those. And the person that got me sober, came from an alcoholic family. And he said to me at one point, like, if you don't get help, I'm going to tell your family how bad it is. Because I was living with him, and so he saw the day ins and day outs of, like, when I got up in the morning and sat in the shower with my kidneys hurting, and I'd cry every morning about how much pain I was in, like, or sneaking, vodka out of the freezer, or making Bloody Marys at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Like, he saw all those things, and I could still kind of hide them from my family. And he was like, this is worrisome. Right. And so at that point, I just wanted to get him off my back. And I tried to go to 12-step meetings a couple of times. My therapist.
What is 12-step? I heard you talk about it before. I just don't know.
Yeah. So 12-step is, it can be AA, NA. So there are different programs per different.
Sorry,
no, it's all good. So Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. So depending on your addiction, you can go to different 12-step programs. And in those programs, there are 12 steps to recovery. And so it's called working a program. And so some people, there's a difference. People say, I don't drink, versus I work a program of recovery. Yeah. So people who don't drink just tend to just stop drinking. Right. But the problem is, when you stop drinking, all of the things that you were drinking over, or the insecurities, they come up. Yeah. And so these 12 steps help you heal from those. Right. And, like, I've shared this, like, you're only as sick as your secrets. And what I learned was that by sharing what I thought were secrets, and, like, I thought I was the worst person in the world because I couldn't stop drinking. But when I walk into a room of other people who are also recovering, and I was like, oh my gosh, you too, you feel less alone. Yeah, so and so the community is really helpful. And so when so 12-step meetings. So I went into some of those, and I just wasn't ready. And so so when he said to me, I think you need help, I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to get you off my back, because I just don't want my family to know. Yeah. So I'm going to check out an outpatient rehab, which is called it's an IOP, intensive outpatient. And I would go after work. And so I'd go for 3 hours, and there's a process of checking in, and other people who are, some people are there because their jobs made them go, and some people are there voluntarily. But I walked in voluntarily and said, I need help. I can't stop drinking.
And then you've been sober since.
And I've been sober
since then.
I walked in on, my last drink was on June 8th, 2007. I walked in to treat my detox in my studio apartment in Washington, D.C., while the Pride Parade was going on outside. Yeah. And I lived in DuPont Circle, and I could hear these people having fun. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, my life, I'm existing in my life. I'm watching it go by like a movie, and I'm miserable. That Monday, June 11th, I walked into treatment, and I asked for help, and I've been sober ever since.
That's amazing. Yeah, and then, so after that, how did you start to see, like, your relationships rekindle? Like, how did you start to find who you were again, or who you wanted to be? And, better yourself after that? Like, what's that experience like?
That's a good question, too. They have a saying in 12 Steps that it takes you 5 years to find your marbles, 10 years to gather them, and 15 years to know what to do with them. And for me,
I love it.
That's accurate. Yeah. I thought when I first went in, I thought that if I just put down the drink and stopped drinking, then my life would be perfect. And that is when I realized, like, there were all these other things that I had drank over, like the not feeling good enough and not feeling and wanting to be somebody else. And so, the past 15 years, and they say that's why it's like working a program, and it's managing my addiction, because there are things I do every day to do that. And I feel like for me at 15 years, when I shared my story, is when I felt the most free, because I had kept it quiet. And everybody's different. Some people are like, nope, I never need to share it. Some people share from day one with their family and their friends and community and church and everything. But that just wasn't my story. I wasn't ready. Yeah. But when I shared it 15 years, it was the first time I felt like my full life had been integrated. Like, I wasn't trying to straddle, like, I can't say this to this person and that to that person. Like, it was just a full.
So you first shared it this past year, 2022. Yeah. And so what was that like? Were people trying to reach back out to you? Like, 15 years of people not knowing it?
So my good friends, my college friends knew, my family knew, but then I'd started to develop friends in DC just socially. You know, when we traveled to the Olympics, like people just knew I didn't drink, but nobody really knew why. And so when I shared for the first time, my friend has a podcast and we went to college together. He was 10 years sober. And
I listened to that one.
Did you with Pete? I talked to Pete on the way up today. I was like, you kicked this whole thing off.
He was like, from Bel Air. And I was like, little does this guy know.
Yeah, he was like, hey, I'd love for you to share your story. Would you ever be interested? And I said, had you asked me 2 months ago, I would have said no, but I'm at a place now where, because my entire life, I always wanted to feel part of something. And I was so worried that people wouldn't like me. Like that's my biggest fear. Yeah. And now I'm 45 at 15 years sober. I'm like, I don't care. Yeah. If you don't like me, you're not my person. Like, because there are other people that do. Yeah. But that took a really long time.
I'm still battling with wanting to be liked.
Yeah. It takes a long, and that's what it's like, it's a process, but the process looks like every single day, like doing work. I do a lot of meditation. I do breath work. Like I've studied modalities to help because look, like I can stay where I am and be fine. Right. Like I can survive. I can I say the rat race. Like I can just exist in life, but like I don't think I'm here to exist. Like I want to thrive and I want to live like a great, happy life and feel joy on the inside. And so it's taken, at 5 years I was diagnosed with severe depression. Okay. And I think that only came out because I was sober and sought treatment for that and talked to a therapist. At 10 years, my child was born. 10 days before my 10th anniversary, Alexander was born. I took him to a meeting to pick up my chip. He was 10 days old. And at 15 years last year, it's the hardest year of my life. My divorce was finalized. It was a really very challenging couple of years before that. So I moved, I launched a business, and my dad died at the end of 20. Right. My dad at the end of 2022, totally unexpectedly. And so and I shared that, like, at the end of last year, I wanted to drink so bad. Yeah. And I said this, I was like, I want to go to a bar and I just want to hang out with people I don't know and I want to get obliterated and I want to check out because right now my world feels like it's turned upside down. Yeah. But because I'd done the work every day, going back to those practices and rituals that I had already put in place and friends, like a community, I was able to do the things I needed to do instead of walking into a bar and like hanging out with strangers and getting, wasted. I also went to Ashley. I went to Ashley with our friend Charlie and shared my story there and like told them, and it's like, cause they say in recovery, like to keep this, you have to give it away. Yeah. It's not something, and it's like the same thing I think with women and female friendships. Like so many women are competitive and it's like, if you excel, it's taking away from me. And it's like not the case. Like I cheer you on when you excel because that means like that's beautiful. Like you're winning for women. Yeah. Like you're doing great and it's not taken away from anything I'm doing, and it's kind of that same mentality in recovery. And I think that's so beautiful. Just cheering on the successes of everyone.
Because it's so, with your story, it's like it's a different scenario. But in my life, like just hearing the stories of other women, like the women that I have on this podcast, it's like, all of the things that you all have done is like, oh my goodness, there's so many possibilities because there was this runner one time, I'm going to get the name right. I want to say it was Camille Herron.
The world record.
Yeah, she just did 48. Yes. So I follow her. I love her. And I actually know that she knows Charlie Engel. Yeah. Because when I ran the Penguin last year, I was like, so if you could like ever just mention the podcast, and she's like, yeah, I'll just share it with her. So now we like follow each other, But she said, I think she was on Rituals podcast, and I wanted to make sure that I think it was her. And she said that that what's amazing is that women are raising the bar, something like this. I'm probably butchering what she said.
Just paraphrase, yeah.
But that women like her are like raising the bar in what we think is possible. So each day that, like 48 hours, do you think ever a woman could run, over 200 something miles in 48 hours? Well, now it's possible. And so that allows girls like me, runners that are competitive, just women in general, realize that, okay, so there's so much room that I can do all of this. And I think growing up in an environment where we were constantly empowered from my parents, from my dad, whether it was in sports or, wanting to do the podcast, Mackenzie doing LLS, like doing all these things, I think being able to have women mentors is something all the girls need, and just being able to realize like, okay, I can grow so much and there's so much growth period, and to celebrate that growth, where I can go. Yeah. Because just knowing that like, okay, I can celebrate this growth. I know that all these things are possible because I've had these stories of women crafted around me and shared with me. And now I like have all these tools, you know, and now to create like the best version of myself. So
yes, and that's exactly why I decided to share my story of recovery, because when I got sober 15 years ago, I had no idea where to turn. I didn't know what was possible, and there was nobody. There weren't any women talking, because look, like there's stories like Charlie Angle, who was living in a car that was shot up with bullet holes, doing crack in a hotel, like, and sensational stories. Talked about our friend Zach Clark, same thing. Like these stories are so sensational, but I was a woman that was drinking 2+ bottles of wine a night and blacking out, and there are people that still said to me, well, that's not that bad. You never drank before work. You never got arrested. You never totaled a car. And I'm like, yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
If I would have kept drinking, there is 100% guarantee I would have done one of those things.
Yeah.
And so for me, I wanted to be able to show women that it is possible that, okay, just 2 bottles of wine or just mommy's sippy cup or whatever those look like as acceptable things in culture doesn't mean that you're not struggling or an addict. 1, 2, it's okay to ask for help. And 3, like this is 15 years. Like this is what an addict looks like.
Right, yeah.
And I look like you know, or I look like your neighbor, or I look like I am a mom, like all of those things. And like, this is part of who I am, and it's okay. And I've survived, and now I'm thriving, and like, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. And now you can be that woman that people can see, because I think, you know, I haven't talked a lot about alcoholism, like being brought up. It wasn't like a topic that we talked about, but especially when my dad met Charlie Engle, my family started, I remember he came to our house, like, I don't even know what grade I was in. I don't even know who he was, but Dad used to have like his guests that he would have like to our house. It was like a regular thing that people would be spending the night in our basement. And I remember Charlie Engle, we went to dinner, and I just like, he was telling his story, and Kenzie and I were so young. I was like, this might be the first story that I ever heard. I remember I was just like, and Dad was like, this guy's amazing. You got to take notes, like just focus. And so then going to the Penguin event last year was like the first time that I was ever at anything that was like about like recovery, like advocating for people that are going through recovery. But yeah, I think a lot of women, like stereotyped alcoholics, are probably more men. Like if you were to, I don't know, I think
the
growing
numbers,
up.
and the numbers show that, right? And like, not to nerd out for a second, but a Harvard study showed that there's a 41% increase in women, heavy drinkers among women after COVID. That's 4 more drinks in every day. But in treatment, it's still 2.5 men to every 1 woman getting sober still after COVID. And so what that says is there's a greater number, women are drinking more and more, but they're not seeking treatment. So why? There's shame.
Right.
They feel like they can't leave their families. They shoulder the burden. They shoulder so much. Homeschooling during COVID, a job, a family, cooking, cleaning, like all of this stuff that, I mean, not to sound stereotypical, but like the things that women do. And there's a whole conversation around that, like invisible labor that women shoulder in general, just because it's what we do. We take care, we nurture, we do. And so we just keep going thinking it's going to go away. Or, you know, if you're 6 friends at a mommy group, and they're all drinking, and they go home and don't have any more, but you go home and drink 2 bottles and think that they're doing the same, like you just have no idea, because nobody's talking openly about it. And so let's make this a conversation where it's not shameful and there isn't stigma around asking for help when it comes to addiction.
Right. And so now that you are, you know, continuing on with your sobriety in 15 years, almost 16, which is amazing. It's like actually almost how old I am. And which is, I mean, I give you all the credit. That is really amazing. I don't know if that's okay to say.
Thank you.
But,
yeah, it's all good.
But what would you, what advice, I know there's a ton of things you'd probably do, but what advice would you give to the young girls that are struggling, you know, especially around age 14, kids are getting into alcohol, or young girls that are struggling with alcohol? What would your advice be to them?
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think back to like little Hilary, right? Like, like what I needed. And it's like knowing that, look, everybody is struggling. Like every single person. It doesn't matter what your friend is putting on TikTok or what she's putting on Instagram or what they're telling you at school. Every single, like, life is hard. It is not easy. There is nobody, like even the people that are successful have challenges every single day. And so you're not alone. Like that's the one thing. It's like you're not alone in your struggles, and you're not alone in your I don't know, sadness, like, but I think the strongest thing you can do is like ask for help. And if it doesn't come, you know, if your family's not a place you can go for support, like ask your friends. If you don't feel comfortable asking your friends, like go to a teacher. If your teachers aren't comfortable, like there are a lot of online support systems. You can reach out to me. Like I'm 100, I answer every, we talked about this. I answer every message I get. I answer every email. I answer every text. Sometimes it's not as quickly, but
No,
I
you're
do get
good.
to it. And so like, just ask for help. I
Yeah.
mean, you're not alone, and like the world needs you. Like we're
Yeah.
all individual and we bring these really beautiful gifts to the world, and I'm not like you and you're not like me, but we have commonalities, but like we each bring different gifts to the world, and like the world needs our gifts.
Yeah. I love that. And then so if you could convince like this younger female generation, my generation, of one thing, what would that one thing be? If you can convince the younger female generation of one thing, what would that be?
If I could say something and they believe it?
Yeah.
You're beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
amazing.
You deserve the best. You are the best. You have gifts. Like, and I didn't know that when I was little. I thought, or younger, I mean, I had angst and I had sadness and I was, probably depressed. And I don't think social media is doing anybody any favors, the younger generation. But we're just going back to that same thing. Like, we all have a gift. I love this quote, and I use it all the time. It's so nerdy. It's like, I think it's Dr. Seuss, but it's like, we're all a genius. But if we judge a fish's ability to climb a tree, then he's a failure. Yeah. And so we're so used to comparing ourselves to other people that we see ourselves sometimes as not good enough or as failures, and that's just not right. That's inaccurate.
Yeah, because we all have different strengths. That's something Mackenzie and I have been talking a lot about because, like I said, we grew up, we were doing the same thing. Like I just had her on the podcast and we discussed this, and so we were doing the same thing, like always hitting the same targets. And then as we started to like get older in high school, senior year, she had the idea for the podcast, but it came to me one day and was like, I think you're a better personality for it. You have more strengths that would be better for it. So it's actually really funny because she, and it has to take a lot of strength because the podcast has been something really big and a lot of people acknowledge that about us. And sometimes it's like, at us, it's like, oh, so you guys have the podcast. And it's hard for her to say, oh, no, it's not my podcast. It's Madison's podcast. Even though she had like the idea. And one day she was just like, I'm going to step back. You do it. And then she's like, I'm going to come co-host sometime. So I hope she actually does co-host. But
that is so beautiful.
But yeah, so it's really, and so like as we gotten older, it's just like, it's been hard for us actually to like being able to like have these different accomplishments at different times. Like I ran my first half marathon years ago, not years ago, like 2 years ago, when I was training for Chicago Marathon. Kenzie just recently ran hers this past week, Tuscaloosa half. And it's so, like, I don't know, I'm getting emotional, but like to be able to have a twin sister and like kind of feel for her in the way that you like never want to like shine. It was actually a really great race because all of our friends came and watched, like all of our best friends came and watched her run that race. And they didn't even see us finish. They were like, okay, Madison, we're not coming to watch. It was actually really great because I was like, someone needs to tell me. She's like, we're not coming to watch you. We're coming to watch Kenzie. And so they actually totally missed me finishing. And they were there on the line. I was right beside them when Kenzie was finishing. They were tracking them the whole time. And just to be able to like have these different, I don't even know where I'm going with what I'm saying, but I think I've lost.
It's a perfect example of just supporting other women, right? And that's what we need. And like, look, when I was in school, like I did not support other women. And when I got sober, I did not support other women. And I was not the woman that I wanted to be friends with. And so I would look at other women and think they're taking from me or they're competing with me or whatever it is. And like, maybe that's it. Surround yourself with women that lift you up. Yeah. They say surround yourself with women that mention your name in a room of opportunities. Like those are your people. And they're always going to be the people that want to pull you back. But like that's such a beautiful story of like your sister empowering you and you are empowering her. And like,
and it's so
that's
weird.
What we need.
And we talk about this all the time. Like our growing up, like our, like just our parents, like really cool, like badass people. Like I hope, like Dad is actually writing a book right now, but which he's already announced so that I can say it, I think hopefully on here. But like just the stories that we have and the stories that we've gained, not just through Dad having a podcast and me having a podcast, but through Mackenzie meeting people, my mom meeting people in her job. So it's so weird. Like I just always think about like how life and like decisions and stories, like me having you on this podcast and what all that opens up and like what I can, hopefully give you, as a friend. And then,
well, it's community. Like so when I was with Charlie and like Nona recently, it's like a longevity and health. It's like Nona Impact Forum. And so it's like Deepak Chopra and Dr. Mark Hyman were there. And so it's like these experts in health and wellness, right? Like really big names. More than one person on different panels at different times in different areas of health and wellness all said that what we need in life for longevity, health and wellness, like sure, we need sleep, we need good food, we need water. Yeah, of course, we need all those things. But the most impactful and important thing that nobody is really like embracing that we need to is community, connection, and purpose. Those are the things that make us feel that's the secret to longevity. Everybody wants a secret. There's your secret, you know? And so it's like, your point, like connecting, right? Sharing stories and connecting with people is what is just makes it a beautiful life.
So we talk about our mutual friends.
Yeah.
I'm going to call Charlie my friend because I think we are, but
Charlie doesn't know a stranger. He is friends with everyone.
Can you just talk about a little bit about your relationship? You can tell the listeners a little bit about who Charlie Engel is, because I don't think I've mentioned his name before.
Okay.
And then just talk about your relationship.
With Charlie?
Yeah.
Charlie's special in like the kindest way. So Charlie and I met at the Penguin last year. So I was doing PR for the event.
You just met last year?
We just met last year, and he is
goodness.
one of my best friends in the world. Like, so we met at the Penguin last year. He was running it. I was doing PR. We were actually on a call, and he's like, I think I know Michael's agent, Michael Phelps' agent, so we can call. And Tara, another girl on the call, was like, you know Hilary is his sister, right? And Charlie's like, I had no idea. And I was like, who is this guy anyway? Like, I had never heard.
Yeah.
Sorry, Charlie. I'd never heard of, like, I mean, I heard about running the Sahara and like, but I didn't know his story. And so I met Charlie for the first time the day before the Penguin started. We did the Penguin together. I know, it's so funny.
So funny.
And now we're like traveling to like Nona together. I talk to him every day. We're on a group chat with another friend. We're talking like planning these like weekends just like to check out with friends. Like, but Charlie's a really special person. I mean, he's probably one of the kindest people I know. He has the biggest heart.
Yes.
He would help anybody at any time with anything without asking questions. He is just a really wonderful soul and a beautiful human. And he, his story is coming up on 31 years of continuous sobriety, which is what we're going to celebrate at Ashley and the Penguin. But he moves for 31 hours continuously, which is wild to me. It's like, it's so crazy.
It's so insane. I can't even. I'll cheer him on.
I know. I'll cheer him on. But Charlie's story, Charlie got sober coming up on 31 years. He was living in his story is just so sensational. Yeah. He was smoking crack in hotel rooms, and someone stole his car, and there was a baby in the car. Like, I was reading his book, and I'm like, dude, you stole a baby? And he's like, what are you talking about, maybe? And I was like, in your book. And he goes, I gave the baby back. I was like, Charlie, what in the world? I go, how are you alive right now? Yeah. And then I said, and thank God, we didn't know each other and we were drinking.
Yeah,
we'd be dead now. But he's wonderful. He's like one of those really special people and special humans that doesn't know a stranger, and everybody adores Charlie.
It's so, because I've only met him a couple times, and I met him when I was younger for the first time. Yeah. And I was kind of like, he's just Dad's friend, like, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't really, like, my mind was still like, I'm still immature, but it was definitely like not the same as it is now. Like, people have a conversation, like a serious conversation. And so, but when we went to the Penguin run, that was the second time I've seen him my entire life. So I've like texted him, Instagram, we've connected, but I haven't like seen him. And I remember he was like on the ground getting like massaged by somebody, because obviously he was running 30 hours straight. He needed a break. And
was it the foot treatment?
Oh, maybe it was.
That was me.
Oh, it probably was.
I was doing reflexology on his feet because he was like, I can't, and I was like, okay, I'll give you a treat. So that was another modality I've studied, and so I was like doing reflexology on his feet.
So funny. Yeah. And first I was probably like, I don't know who would do that. I probably thought about that. I was like,
they must be really good friends.
Yeah. But then he got up and started to run with us like a little bit after, and I still get like nervous around him because it's like Charlie Engel, like Mackenzie. And I love his story, like, and he's like, it's just weird because he's like, he knows us, he knows Dad, but just how open and like relaxed you can feel around him, like in the same way that I was like, okay, I kind of feel nervous, like, because he's like, this big person has accomplished all these amazing things, but when he starts to talk to you, it's like you can connect and like immediately feel like, okay, I can share like the world with him, and so that's really special, and I really love that about him.
His superpower. He makes you feel like you're the only person in the room, right? Like, he like listens to you and he can connect with you different. Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely.
So tell us about the Penguin run this year. Just tell them all
The
about
Penguin. I can't wait. It's on July 22nd and 23rd
Yeah.
at Ashley Addiction Treatment in Habit of Grace. We're doing it a little bit differently this year than we did last year. We are going to have the 5K on Saturday. We're going to make it like a carnival style. We're going to have food trucks and gifts, games for kids, like a water slide, things like that. So it's really fun. It's a fundraiser to provide scholarships to people who may not be able to afford treatment. And so it's literally saving lives. And we're having the 5K. And then there is the ultra option for the insane option for those folks who want to move for 31 hours. Yeah. But I will say, you can also camp. Like some people camped or like slept in their car for hours. Yes, and you can do that in the grounds at Ashley, like when you register. So you do not have to move the entire 31 hours, but it is a really powerful experience. It is that great sense of community, and you get to so last year when we did it, there was a group of probably 20, maybe 25, and we afterwards were like, and this was like when gas was like $85 a gallon. It's like really, nobody talked about gas, nobody talked about politics. No, we left the night, we were like, wait a second, we talked about real things. Like nobody was complaining about how hot it was. It was like 110 degrees. Nobody was doing it.
Probably
remember that. But I mean, it was like humid. But like at that point, everybody smelled bad. Everybody.
I definitely was. I was like, Charlie, and then that photo, I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh, you look gorgeous. It's so funny, right? We're so hard on ourselves.
I know.
Like. And so we're going to do that. And there is the option 31 hours. It's really powerful. We're talking about doing a VIP silent disco Saturday night, which is so fun. Like the earphones, and you just like jam out, and it's dancing under the stars at Ashley because it's,
to see Dad do that. That's
awesome. My gosh. Yes. Dad, you have to come.
Chad would love it. He would.
You're there. I'm putting you both on the list. Mackenzie too.
But, Kenzie
and your mom
would definitely. Mom would be laughing at all of us sitting down. But so Penguin Run last year, I'll say my favorite memory from it. I think it was immediately when we were walking up, I was like, okay, these people might hate us because, if they've been running for like 30 hours, and here I am, I'm like, I'm going to do 3 miles with you. I got you, and then I'm going to leave.
You come in looking good, smelling fresh.
Yeah. And here these people are like, Brendan, when we saw one of my closest friends, Brendan Ring, he was like really not in it. Like he just wasn't, like he couldn't talk. Like he was so in pain.
I remember that.
I was like, I don't know, do I just stop running? Like, I was like, do I stop talking? Like, I don't know. He needed us there. And I think in that one moment, he needed his people just to, like, be with him. So he wasn't alone. But it was also amazing because, like what I was going to say, is we walked up, and in 3 seconds, 3 men ran over, and we just started running together. And I remember, like, just immediately they shared their stories. They shared who they were. And like I said, Zach, Clark, and all of them, the people that, like, I didn't even know, like, I was just so focused in on, like, their stories, some of their stories with addiction, and then some of their stories with like what they're doing now and their foundations. And so that's what I'm probably more excited about this year. Dad just said, oh guys, we have to go to the Penguin. I was like, oh Dad, I already knew, like we're already planning on going to this. And he was so great. And so we're going to come again this year, but
connection, community, and purpose, right? Yeah. Just jumping right in. They shared their story. They shared their purpose, like the foundation. Amazing. Yeah. The Release Recovery Foundation. I mean, it's such a powerful day. Yeah. It's such a powerful experience. I loved it. I mean, everybody talked like for weeks after. We still keep in touch with everybody that was there.
I think I follow like a bunch of the people that I met, and I was literally just there for like 2 hours, 3 hours. But so my last 2 questions, I ask all my guests. The first one, do you read? And if so, what's your favorite book?
Hands down favorite book, Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life by Bob Proctor. Mm-hmm. Hands down, read it 10 times. Well, I audiobooked it 10 times. Same thing. So it's because it is, every time I listen to it, I'm in a different space and I pick up something different. And it talks about changing the paradigm of the ways that we think. So it's subconscious changing. It is, I give it out to people. It is the best book. I'm also reading, and I read again, The 4 Agreements. I think it's so important.
Dad loves The 4 Agreements.
Over and over and over. It is so important because it's like, one of the best lines, it's like all wars start because we take things personally, we make assumptions. And I think back to every fight or argument, I'm like, well, that person thinks this, and so therefore I jump to conclusions. So trying to like incorporate some of those into my life has made a huge change in my emotional well-being.
Right. I love it. Those are great options. My goodness, Dad would be like, yes, approve. And then I kind of asked you this once before, but if you could tell the one girl or to the girls that are struggling to find their self-worth, what one thing, if you had to pick one, obviously there are many, what one thing would you tell the girl struggling to, know her self-worth and self-confidence?
Like, you're worth it and keep going.
Yeah.
Don't quit. Ask for help. Like, it's hard to struggle in silence, and it's hard to feel alone. And so if you can find people, just one person, a best friend, a family member, a therapist, like somebody, just find someone and don't give up until you find that person.
Yeah, that's super powerful. Well, we'll end it on that note. But thank you so much for coming. I love it.
Thanks for having me.
So amazing.
I could talk to you for hours.
Okay. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'm so glad. Have the best day ever. Bye.